You need to wake up before it's too late. Elon Musk has decided to pull down the curtain on what's really driving the declining population growth in Western nations, as well as the dangerous connecting thread to a culture of hedonism and pleasure that's leading our societies to their own demise. And while Musk has spoken about this before, I think he's more candid in this conversation with Jordan Peterson than we've ever seen before. That's exactly why I believe this is the perfect place for me to tell you some difficult truths about the future of our society if we don't correct course. So please subscribe to the channel with this incredible exchange before I tell you more about it.
Your thinking on the natalist front has actually been, what would you say, has been an input into that. Because I started to notice, well, I don't know, I don't think it was 20 years ago that I'd caught on to that. It was not that long ago, but I knew that there was something terribly wrong with the fact that the birth rates have plummeted so terribly. In South Korea and Japan, I think in South Korea now it's something like 40% of men in their 30s are virginal.
So if you look at, say, Japan, which I think had on the order of 800,000 births last year, and then you multiply that by the lifespan, which is around 84, 85 years, you get to a population that's in the sort of 60 to 70 million range, which is a massive decrease from where it is today. Over 100 million.
Yeah, well, it seems to me the combination of that lack of engagement on the relationship side plus the plummeting birth rate, it seems to me to be a primary biological marker of profound demoralization. Because I mean, people aren't committing to the future or to each other.
Yes, I mean, having a kid is a vote for the future. So if you intend to have a child like that, that means you care about the future.
Yeah. You believe in the future.
You believe in the future. Having a child, assuming it's intentional, is it's the most optimistic thing.
Yes.
And it's that vote in the future that not enough people in America are making, since the birth rate in America at an abysmal 1.6 births per couple is not even enough for replacement of the population over time, which is a minimum of 2.1. And I want you to notice something even scarier that's easy to miss when Elon Musk says the term population collapse rather than just population decline. It's because the drop in birth rate doesn't result in a linear drop in population, but an exponential drop. Fewer children today means fewer adults tomorrow. Fewer adults means fewer people to have children, until that ends in a spiral downward that's uncontrollable after a certain threshold. And here's what's scary. That has already started happening in the United States, because the only thing keeping the US population afloat is the influx of migrants from around the world, while also preventing a shortage of labor like what Japan is facing as a corollary to its population crisis. But I think it's all too easy to be lost in the numbers and statistics while forgetting both their cause and cost. That is all too human. Both Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk are perhaps two of the most countercultural figures in today's Malthusian and almost anti-human thinking you find in some political quarters. And that's a problem, because as powerful as their voices are, the mere fact that they are the exception should tell you that there's something terribly wrong with the social messaging around children, healthy population growth, and the relationship that are the basis for it all.
Well, one of the things is a decreasing birth rate, which seems to be a natural consequence of prosperity.
Isn't that strange, eh? Because you'd kind of predict the opposite, wouldn't you?
As far as I know, every civilization that has experienced prosperity has had a decline in population. There may be a few exceptions. Perhaps people can enlighten me. I'll look at the comments on this interview to see perhaps what I can learn. But it seems that from what I've read, almost every civilization, when they become prosperous, their birth rate drops.
You think that's a consequence of the emergence of something like a non-punished hedonistic egocentrism?
Well, yeah, obviously, you mean there's certainly many examples of civilizations that become prosperous. There is generally a trend towards hedonism.
Yeah, well, you can get away with it if you're wealthy, eh? Because the consequences of your foolishness don't smack you on the head instantly.
Precisely. So, if you're a civilization under threat, like let's say if you take, say, Rome, when they were trying to not get annihilated by Carthage, and they had Hannibal running around marauding Italy, they didn't have time for hedonism.
Right.
Hedonism is not an option. We're going to get destroyed by Hannibal.
The chips are down.
And when a civilization's under stress, there's very little hedonism that takes place.
That alone is enough to explain why there's a predictable correlation between higher GDP per capita and lower birth rates in a phenomenon called demographic transition. And it has always struck sociologists and anthropologists as odd because you would think that being able to afford more children would lead societies to having a higher birth rate, but the fact that it's the reverse reveals a grim truth about life in the global south in a society where there's not much upward mobility or source of meaning and sustenance to look for. Having more children tends to become a way of increasing their chances of climbing out of the abyss of poverty. And paradoxically, the more affluent a society, the more diluted that need for children, and the more actively society needs to incentivize more children. As Musk just said, hedonism only goes so far because that's exactly the message that modern society does not want to hear. And the declining birth rate, which is the most genuine existential crisis that can exist, is the result of multiple pressures from both the inside and out. For one, we've turned the idea of romantic relationships from a union that results in children to another source of aimless hedonistic pleasure. The financial crunch and inflation that young people feel makes them put off starting a family, while society gives them a million different trivial distractions to throw them off one of the most important things they will do in their life, which is have children. Scale that over hundreds of millions of people and you realize that the first step to correcting the course is speaking the difficult truths about the problem. And so far, Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk are one of the only few voices trying to make that happen.
And I consider myself an environmentalist, but I think the environmental movement has gone too far. And
you're not supposed to worship nature, you know.
Well, it's gone too far in the sense that in its extreme, you start viewing humans as a blight on the face of the earth.
That turns out to be a real problem.
Yeah, mostly implicitly, but sometimes explicitly. How can something which is, I think, generally, it sort of starts out with good intentions, but ultimately sort of pave the road to hell is environmentalism in the extreme.
Yeah.
That starts to view humans as bad, humans as a load on the earth that the earth can't sustain. These are completely false.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that the economists and the biologists tend to separate into segregated camps on that front, because the biologists tend to be Malthusian, and that makes them really bad biologists.
Yeah.
So I think it was, I can never remember the philosopher who said this, but it's a brilliant observation, is that we evolved thought so that our thoughts could die instead of us. The Malthusian limits, they don't apply to us in the same way. And so the economists got that right. It's like we can innovate our way out of scarcity. In fact, I don't like the idea of natural resource, for example. I think that's a Marxist notion, natural resource. It's like air. Okay, I'll give you air. Everything else, fresh water, that is not a natural resource. And kerosene or fossil fuel just laid in the ground until like 1850 because nobody could figure out what the hell to do with it.
It's always intrigued me why someone like Elon Musk would get so much heat for warning against the anti-human strand of new environmentalism when he's actually done more than the environment than any single person could ever do with the innovation and adaptation of electric vehicles. Let me know in the comments why you think that is, because it's truly a window into how politicized a lot of these movements have become to their own detriment.